Today, I have with me Olivia Qasir, who is a member of Bloomfield Hall Executive Board. She has published several books with the school with a focus on history, English language, and literature. She's also a freelance filmmaker and has worked for Vice India and Vice World News, where she has directed and produced Why We March, Women of Lahore, that explores the women's movement in Pakistan through the Aurat March, whilst her film Inside Pakistan's War on TikTok has over 1 million views on YouTube. This is quite a bio, Olivia. Congratulations, for all your achievements and welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Aside from being a very dear friend, I think you're just a very inspirational person, which is why I really wanted to do this with you. It's really amazing to have you here, especially from across the border.
I know, and it's so important to conduct things like this.
So, Olivia, tell me a little bit about, Bloomfield Hall. Tell me about the school, how it started. How many schools do you have now?
So currently we have 45 schools across the country, and it began in 1984, and I can't say I can take any of the credit for that. My parents were both educationists, and they met in London. And my dad, who was much more sort of entrepreneurial, saw that there was a great opportunity and potential in the private sector for education in Pakistan. And so in 1984, they set up their first branch in Lahore.
Yeah.
And Bloomfield Hall School was actually one of the first schools to offer A-levels. The only other school that was doing it at the time was Aitchison, and Aitchison is a very old establishment. It's a posh boys' school, so it's only limited to boys.
Only boys.
Yes, so this actually opened up the opportunity for girls to study A-levels, and so we were the first school to do that. And so it's just been growing and expanding, and and I joined about 5 years ago.
And how's your journey been, coming into, education in itself has changed so much since the 80s. There is just so much change all over the world, and the curriculum, teachers, etc. How have you sort of kept up with it? What are the changes you have come in and made in the school?
That's a good question. I think, I always felt like, what do I actually have to offer?
Yeah.
And I never wanted to be what I still consider myself as sometimes, which is a Nepo baby. But
knowing you're definitely not that. That I can vouch for.
Thank you. No, I really try. I try and fight that label within myself as well. And so I have thought, what can I actually bring to the table that isn't already there in place?
Yeah.
And so with that, I think I am trying to sort of bring about centrally a sort of a connection with thinkers, academics, artists, with sort of things like panel discussions and seminars and webinars. And these are the things that I kind of want to promote, especially in terms of creating an atmosphere of tolerance, especially within the kind of climate we live in today. I think that's extremely important. And that was always Bloomfield Hall's ethos, but I'm trying to kind of enhance that in a way.
Yeah, and I've seen all the work you're doing on social media, the kind of events you have, the kind of things children really participate in, whether it's Black Lives Matter or things that are happening in Gaza. It's just, they're so involved, and it's literally like a project to know about it, write about it, and really give your opinion on how to change things, as opposed to just being a mere witness of what's happening around the world. And I've seen, I've worked with so many schools in India. You're probably one of the only schools who's doing it at such an active level, and it's really amazing. The work that you guys do is really, really amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we do try, because education really isn't just about, grades and within, the confines of the classroom walls. It's so much more than that. And that's what we want to distinguish ourselves as against and compared to other schools. It's about like broadening one's horizons, expanding one's cultural kind of exposure, and realizing that we're not just one close-knit society, that there's
Yeah.
like a global perspective and a world out there, because yeah.
Yeah, and in Pakistan especially, I was reading that 22.8 million children between the age of 5 and 16 are out of school. So given everything that's going on, what's happening over there with respect to children really having to study, the government really not enforcing, but really promoting education,
So yeah, I guess there's a huge discrepancy at the moment between the private sector and then state schools. I mean, it's so like the gap is so wide. It's kind of, there's no competition really, and it's very sad if you are a working class person trying to educate yourself, better your life, and be more socially mobile. It's not possible with the educational systems that we have in place when it comes to government schools. We even have, for example, ghost schools, where the government will give funding to some minister in a local municipality, and that will go straight into their pockets. And so on paper, that school exists, but really there's nothing there. And that is so common throughout the country. It's very, very, it's sad. And that is owing to this, I guess, atmosphere of corruption, and just not enough infrastructure. And then I guess the main thing is also poverty, right?
I was just
people, so people, they're not going to invest, especially in their girls. If they're going to send a child to school, it's going to be a boy, because boys are going to take care of parents when they're older, whereas a girl will just go to another family and serve that family. So there's that. And then there's also the fact that our government spending, we have about less than 2% of our GDP goes towards education in Pakistan.
Wow.
So there's a myriad of reasons why so many children are out of school nowadays, and why we have such, poor literacy rates. But these are some of the top main ones that I've just described.
And, you just mentioned it, and this was going to be my next question, that there's a huge, like a skewed ratio with the number of women, girls going to school versus the boys. Is this something that everyone is really talking about and addressing this issue actively? And do you think that's changing slowly, or do you think it's just how it is, and you don't see it changing anytime soon?
That's a very good question. I think it's definitely on a very, very steep incline.
Yeah.
It's people who are putting money into education, even these private charity schools, for example, they are trying to get more girls into education. But that being said, there is a culture over here, I'm afraid, that does tend to prioritize boys over girls for the reasons that I just listed. And I don't know how difficult or easy that is to overcome. And the situation isn't looking very good, I'm afraid. Yeah.
But do you think when people are employing, people in Pakistan, they actually prefer hiring boys over girls? Is that a mindset there?
I mean, it depends on what industry you're going towards. Generally, I guess, I mean, I think this is the case with most places, even more developed countries. It's more difficult for a woman to do anything and to achieve anything. There are certainly more hurdles that we all have to face to get the same thing that a much more privileged man would get in his position. So having said that, some places of work will prefer employing females because that means because of the gender wage gap, and therefore they'll have to pay less.
Oh, wow.
So it depends on the industry once again. We as a school, actually, we employ many more women, and that's just especially at the primary level. And one of the facts, it's quite sad actually, primary school teachers are, the majority of them, if not all, are women.
Yeah.
And that's because a lot of them are just waiting to get married, and we don't know whether their in-laws will actually allow them to work again. But it's just a kind of waiting game in that interim period, and just making some money along the way. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite hard. I mean, it's very interesting
Mm.
to see. So
Mm.
tell me, in your school, at Bloomfield, again, like what you mentioned that, you focus a lot on integrating current affairs. You talk about things more, which goes way beyond academics, right? So what is
Mm.
what is your curriculum all about?
So this is a British style educational system. So we
Yeah.
prepare our children for O and A level exams using exam boards such as Cambridge, but we also do Edexcel. In our earlier years, we really focus on a STEM learning approach, which, by the way, I feel like government schools do the opposite,
Yeah.
which is focusing on rata. This is A,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Yeah, there's
No
no
kind of
question. You're not allowed to ask. There's no
creatively
critical
doing.
thinking.
There's no critical thinking. Yes. So yeah, so we encourage critical thinking as well. And so that's really our focus. We really focus on creativity and arts and culture and poetry and debating, which is a huge aspect of our curriculum that we sort of make sure all children take part in.
And, I think you just, while you were speaking about this, it just came to my mind that there's so many parents who are, like India especially, right, is extremely academic. Everybody only starts getting serious when it comes to grade 10, because now suddenly you have to start learning and there are competitive examinations. Is that also the case in Pakistan, where, it's very, very exam centric, or are parents willing to sort of explore other things and say, what, let my child carve their own path and see what happens?
Yeah. Well, nowadays, just because universities focus not just on grades, but on extracurricular, finally, a lot of parents are like, okay, I'll let my child do something fun or organizational or managerial or something
Yeah.
or, be part of, a sports fest or
Yeah.
a music festival, or go into something that is more dynamic. But that's something that's only recently happened, and that's just because of university entries.
And are these universities, are people sending their kids just mostly in Pakistan to universities, also mostly abroad from your school? What do you see the ratio is?
I think it's a mix. I mean, I would say it also depends on affordability. We have a lot of our students have gone to some very prestigious universities abroad. Nowadays, with the cost of living crisis, I think it's much, much harder for a lot of students everywhere, especially with foreign fees. But otherwise, yeah, we encourage our students to go abroad as much as they can. In terms of like grades-based learning, in many respects, when it comes to like humanities sort of subjects, we are definitely behind. But in terms of maths and science and accounting and stuff, I would say, like, even at a global level, I think Pakistan and other South Asian countries, I'm sure, are much further ahead. And like my personal experience was when I was terrible at maths. I still am. But I went from a school in Pakistan to one in London. It was Queen's College, and this was for my A levels. And I was sitting in the common room with someone who was doing maths A levels, whereas I was just I did drama and English literature and history of art and all the stuff that I like. But this girl was like, what's this over that? She was doing some fractions, and I just did it in my head. And I was like, I think it's that. And she just looked at me and she was like, oh my God, you're so clever. and just because of my maths training over here, and a lot of it is rata, and even like my times tables. I think in many ways I think that's very, very important to, it's an important skill to have.
Yeah,
A
definitely.
lot of people who prefer critical thinking and stuff, and perhaps would say, no, that's not very creative. It's not a good way of learning, but I disagree
No,
to
I
a
agree.
large extent.
Certain things
Mm.
just have to be learned because they have to be learned. But having said that, your point to humanities, I think this is I mean, I studied history as well, and I hated math. I hated it. I mean, I never really understood it too much, and it was never a
Mhm.
passion of mine.
Yeah,
Even for
yeah.
science, I was, I just had to study because I had to take exams. But I loved history. I love psychology because I really could relate to it. And in
Mm,
India, or, like you said, Pakistan, there is so much
mm.
emphasis given to maths and science, but no one really wants to learn history. In fact, history is for all the students who are, useless in other subjects. They are the ones who end up going to
Yes,
humanities.
that was me. Yeah.
So I think that's the big issue. It's a huge mindset problem. And whereas if you go abroad,
And yeah, well, I was going to say, sorry to interrupt. You're always made to feel like less
yeah,
intelligent.
absolutely.
As someone who was bad at maths, I thought I
Inferior.
was stupid
Yeah,
and everything else. Yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, sorry, carry
absolutely.
on.
No, but I mean, when
Mm,
you go abroad, these topics are given so much importance, history and philosophy. I mean, I didn't even know what philosophy was while I was in school as part of the curriculum.
mm,
No one even used that word. It was just not
mm,
taught. So it's
mm.
incredible how certain topics in maybe Southeast Asian countries or South Asian countries are completely ignored because they just feel like it's just not relevant for us to know to get jobs. But there's so many
Yeah.
important other skills that you learn from these subjects that math cannot teach you or science cannot teach you. So
Hmm.
it's amazing that you promote it so much because it just really brings out a different dimension in a person, I feel.
Mm, yeah, it does. Yeah. And of course, you're alienating so many of your students.
Yeah,
They'll grow up with all sorts of insecurities, and really it's just because they weren't given the right environment to thrive in. And that's it, like kids who are good with art as well. I wish there were more funding in like the
yeah.
art department, because yeah, that's an environment where you know people can grow and thrive in, and they're not
Absolutely.
necessarily going to be good at maths. Yeah.
So talking about history, obviously a huge part of our curriculum was always about India, Pakistan, right? And
Yeah.
it's such a sensitive, controversial topic. I mean, we're the same people, but we have so many, issues, the two nations. How do you
Mm.
sort of teach that to your students? How do you address this issue? Just to make sure they don't have they don't have a very biased opinion on this.
Well, so our O-level exams, for example, and all children have to do Pak studies if they want to attend a school in Pakistan. They have to do
Yeah,
it. It's compulsory. All of our Pak studies books are quite biased over here, and there's no way around it. We have history books that we've published and written ourselves,
yeah,
under Bloomfield Hall Publications, but these are for the younger years. And in that, we try our best to be as impartial and
yeah.
unbiased as possible. And that's all I can say, really. But, I would advocate for more, I don't know, openness and unbiasedness. But I think in terms of national curriculums, I don't know what it's like in India with like textbooks, but it is warped. I
Yeah.
mean, we still haven't sort of apologized to Bangladesh for 1971. We haven't even acknowledged it as, a lose,
Yeah.
as a defeat. But the fact that, so many heinous crimes were committed in that region, we haven't acknowledged it, we haven't apologized, nothing. There's no kind of retribution or anything like that. And I think that's very sad. And I think that we need to see much more of that.
Yeah, I mean, even for well, you even in India, the history when it comes to Pakistan is quite biased, I would say. It's just
Yeah.
so hard to have an objective view because from such an early age, you're watching these movies, you're watching things which are so one-sided. And it's interesting
Absolutely.
because I had the same opinion until I visited Pakistan, which was, I think, in 2017, when I came there and I was in London and I saw the people that we're all just the same. And, we love each other. There's just so much love between the people. But it's just there's so much propaganda around it that people just have a completely different impression. Even when I was going to come and visit Pakistan, everyone was just like, how can you go there? And once you go there, you'll always be questioned in India and you'll never be able to travel to other countries and you won't get a visa for the US and this and that. And there was just all, so much around it, but nothing happened. I mean, and life just moved on and there was no issue. And I think it was one of the best trips of my life. I loved it so much. The people were so welcoming. There was so much love, and they were, everywhere I was going, they were just like, you're like our sister from India, and we have relatives in India, and relatives in India have I mean, my grandparents were from Pakistan before, before the partition. So we're all it's just really sad that.
Really? Okay, you were from the side.
Yeah, my grandfather
It's very sad that a line was drawn by a very, very careless Lord Mountbatten, who had nothing to do with India. And all of a sudden, that's it. And people didn't even have time to leave and get up. And it was such a callous, careless time in history.
Yeah. So, the other thing that I want to talk about, moving on from history, which is extremely important to be addressed, and a lot of schools shy away from it, is sex education, right? So is that something that's part of your curriculum?
It's not part of our curriculum. And I wish it were. We talk about sexual harassment. And even from a very early age, we do things like good touch, bad touch. I think that's very important. However, in terms of just a healthy attitude towards sex and practicing safe sex and contraception and all of that we don't talk about. And I think we're too conservative a society to do that, to launch that. And I think it would upset more people, which is unfortunate because then we don't know where children are getting their information from. Obviously, we can hope that their parents are having healthy conversations with them, but I think a lot of the time that doesn't happen, and then people get their information from all sorts of places that have a completely wrong idea of what a healthy relationship to sex and all of that is. So I think that's unfortunate, but I don't think as a society that is something that we're ready for. I don't know what it's like in India.
No, even here, I mean, I think everyone talks about sexual harassment, and you have these, but sexual harassment is also a part of the whole sex education. It's if you need to sort of know so much more about it. Some people don't even when you're younger, you don't even know if you're feeling harassed because you're afraid to talk about it. You're afraid to tell your parents, your friends, because you feel like you're doing something wrong if you talk about what's happening, and I think that's a huge thing. And aside from that, of course, sex for pleasure and other things are just not talked about at all.
No.
And it's sad because so many kids, or when you're younger, or even when you're in your teens, you end up making so many mistakes that you can avoid if you just had more idea and more. I know it's a very difficult conversation, but it has to be done. It's just one of those things.
Absolutely.
But do you encourage parents to talk about it when you have your parent-teacher meetings, or do you just feel like you have to just completely avoid that conversation because they'll be offended?
Yes, basically the latter. It just we have to pretend like that doesn't happen. And it only happens after, people get married. And therefore it's one's business, which, I don't know about the realities of that in this country, especially when it comes to, sexually transmitted diseases as well, because HIV is actually quite common amongst the working classes in Sindh. And obviously, things like that spread eventually, and it's so dangerous. And so when people aren't practicing safe sex and know about STDs and know about kind of where to go, whom to speak to, whether you can actually be honest with your doctor, it's not something that anybody has ever thought of. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think slowly they're trying to make changes here. At least schools call maybe a few. Well, again, it's a very sensitive topic. So I think it's just one of those things where we're far away from it. But hopefully, you know, things will open up, because I think it's such an, in fact, we launched at Instrucco a course called Sexual Wellness and Health, where we do talk about not just good touch and bad touch, but practicing safe sex, etc., for students over a certain age group. Because at least parents should have the option to take these classes privately, if not you know, something that's being taught in school, because it's extremely important to have the option. And I understand that parents might not necessarily feel confident, neither are they properly formally trained perhaps to talk about all kinds of, it's such a huge topic, you know, there's so many things. It's not just about practicing safe sex. Again, like there's STDs, there's good touch, bad touch. And if you have perhaps someone, well, some kids would also be embarrassed asking their parents questions, but maybe if there was a teacher, they would just ask, you know, in a tuition. So I think those things also make a huge difference to sort of promote and really talk about. The other thing, you know, at least in India, we've seen is that we have, obviously now we're working on changing the curriculum. You know, there's been a new education policy that has come out where they've revamped the curriculum after 36 years, and thank God for that. But, you know, now we're focusing on teaching kids through stories and more critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and all these amazing things are being talked about, which are extremely utopian and, you know, they sound really good on paper, but the issue really is that there are no trained teachers, you know, and it's really hard to beat that sort of rote learning out of the teacher and make her unlearn everything before she starts to teach in this new methodology that we've really been sort of trying to implement. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you tackle this issue?
So, I mean, Bloomfield Hall has its own teacher training programs that we do often throughout the year. We also have separate external sort of teacher training institutions, such as the Ali Institute, which is where we've gotten many of our teachers, and they're especially very good with early learning. But yeah, no, it's not easy. Obviously, we will prioritize teachers who have a better record, longer experience. We prioritize teachers who've worked abroad as well. And I think it also depends on city to city. So obviously, the larger, more cosmopolitan the city, and the longer history it has with education, literacy, and all of that, definitely will get better teachers. So, you know, in the main cities like Lahore, Karachi, Islamabad, Multan, we have, you know, excellent teachers. We have really good teachers actually in Sahiwal and Faisalabad. But obviously, you know, there is a limit when it comes to various cities and how much exposure those cities have had, and whether they're cosmopolitan or not. So yeah.
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, even for us to find amazing teachers, the issue is also the attrition rate is so high in teachers. You know, they just kind of come, then they get married, then they go for long breaks, but they don't understand how much they lose out by just going for these long breaks, because education is evolving so quickly that unless you just on the ball, you know, that after a couple of months, if you come back, so much has changed, you know, in terms of especially technology, implementing things, you know, just working with different students. And it's so important to have that bond. You know, I remember some teachers in school that I loved, and I used to love attending their classes. And I think those are the subjects I did really well in. You know, and if there were some teachers I absolutely disliked, I won't use a harsher word, even though I'd like to. You know, I just didn't perform well in those subjects because I hated learning from them. You know, it was just so boring.
Their hearts aren't into it either. You can always tell when a teacher's heart is into
and you know, when they look at you and they're like, you know, you don't know the subject and I have no interest in teaching you because I'd rather focus on the kids who already know. But it should be the opposite, you know, and so you can really tell the difference between somebody who's truly in it for the passion.
Yeah,
So someone who's just, passing their time and just trying to keep themselves busy. Great.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
obviously you've come to my podcast, which is No Idea Whatsoever. And the idea
Yeah.
is to discover things, that you had no idea about. So did you always know you wanted to get into education because your parents were in it, or did you discover this eventually?
So I always thought this is something I can fall back on, but I thought that's not something I didn't think it was very adventurous.
Yeah.
But I also realized that it's a very noble profession as well, and not something to be looked down upon either. So, but at the same time, after I sort of was graduating from my master's, it was kind of like, what are you going to do now? I had dabbled in teaching. I really enjoyed teaching English literature. Sometimes I wasn't very good at class control. I'm not an authoritarian. I'm not authoritative. I don't like telling people off, I just think, chalo theek, if that person doesn't want to learn, I'm not going to. But then, of course, with younger kids, you have to, command so much attention and respect and be strict. And I hate that. And, there's some teachers who tell you not to chew chewing gum.
Yeah.
And I let my kids chew chewing gum. I'm like, it's okay. So I'm not a disciplinarian at all. So I thought, yes, okay, this is very good to fall back on, but I want to do something different. And I went into documentaries. And I really enjoyed that. I'm still doing them at the moment.
And I've seen them. They're brilliant. Some of this stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're really, really amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, because I feel like it's also, I did my undergrad and master's in history. And so you can draw a lot of what you've learned and put it into documentaries. So it's kind of like, it's a jack of all trades kind of career move, I think. However, having said that, working at the school and feeling like I'm actually also making a difference, it's something that I thought I'd never do, because I was like, oh no, this is too easy, or I don't want to be a Nepo baby. But it's working out so far. I'm actually enjoying it. And yeah.
No, and there's so much that you've been doing. I've been seeing everything, and it's just it's not easy. And just because your parents started it doesn't mean you can take it. You can't take it to different heights, and you are doing that. So also, I think documentaries is something that's your passion, and you can continue to do that. And
absolutely.
And in fact, you'll be inspiring more students with the topics that you talk about, because they're all very relevant and important topics that everyone should be talking about.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, I don't know if I've ever actually done a screening of my document. I should.
Yeah, you really should. I can't believe that. Why haven't you done that yet?
No, I don't know. But I guess maybe it's just me not trying to be a
No, but you must.
Everybody now has a documentary.
No, it's important for them to see it, because that's also something. See, you've mentioned the word Nepo baby a few times, and I think that is something that firstly you're not, and also once you show this documentary, people are going to look at you with a very different lens. They're literally going to see your work and really understand that you're super talented as a person.
Oh, thank you. You're making me blush.
Thank you very much, Olivia, and I can't wait to see you soon. Hopefully,
when are you coming to London?
Well, London will be sometime later, but hopefully our borders will open and we'll be able to visit each other in our original countries.
That would be amazing. One day.